Are you ready to get started?
I am. I'm sorry for my late arrival. I was confused as to the time. That doesn't normally happen to me.
No problem. Let's get started. All right, I'm going to go ahead and end the poll. All right. Well, thank you everybody for joining us today. This is a webinar on cause analysis and corrective action plan. I know the Qualtrics and the ANAB teams are extremely excited to present this popular topic to you today. We've got a number of people on the call with us. So before we get started, I do want to go through just a few housekeeping items. Number one, this presentation is being recorded and will be available to everybody that is registered for this presentation. We're also going to share the slide deck as well. Towards the end of the presentation, we are going to have a 15-minute Q&A section that we're going to go through questions and answers. So as you watch the presentation today, if you have anything that pops out you want to get some more information about, let us know, pop it into the Q&A section, and we'll make sure to get those answered. Now, I will say we have a large group of people on, so if for some reason we don't get to your question, don't worry, we'll make sure that it's addressed and somebody contacts you after the presentation. So my name is Karen Arriviaga, and I am an account executive here at Qualtrics. And so we have a mix of attendees joining us today. So before we get to the main event, I'd like to give you a quick overview of who Qualtrics is. Qualtrics is a compliance software platform specifically designed to manage quality initiatives. Organizations turn to Qualtrics when they're looking to reduce or eliminate the burden associated with manual or paper-based systems. And really what you're doing is automating some of those key processes that you need to with quality. Qualtrics was founded in 1993 when our parent company was pursuing ISO 9001 certification. They were looking for a way to streamline the process and ensure that no details were overlooked. So they started from scratch and built the framework that would ultimately become Qualtrics. Now, not only did they crush their audit, but the assessors were so impressed with the software that it suggested that we start selling it. So we did. Today, more than 25 years later, we're the leader in quality and compliance industry, and we're happy to count several accrediting bodies among our customers, including today's presenter, ANAB. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to Melanie Ross. So Melanie Ross is a training product specialist for ANAB, and she has over 15 years of experience in quality assurance, quality control, and quality management. She has worked in a variety of industries, including chemical, biological, oil and gas, and aerospace, developing quality management systems, including internal audit programs, vendor qualification procedures, and the implementation of Lean Six Sigma. As a training product specialist with ANAB, Melanie is developing and delivering training on a variety of topics, including ISO IEC 17025 and risk-based thinking. At this time, Melanie, I'm going to invite you to take control of the screen and share yours and do your portion of the presentation.
I will do that.
Great. And I'll let you know when I can see your screen. I can see it.
Excellent.
Wonderful.
Okay. Well, good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for this webinar. I'm excited to see so many people interested in this topic. There's like over 300 people on the webinar, and that's really neat for me. I look forward to going through these materials. Thanks, Karen, for the great introduction, and let's get started. Key takeaways for this webinar include defining cause analysis and understanding the corrective action process, including the difference between correction and corrective action, understanding the changes in the ISO IEC 17025 standard from the 2005 edition to the 2017 edition as well, and finally, how to evaluate the significance of non-conforming work. Before we dive into the content of the presentation, let's look at one of the polling questions from the entry to the webinar. One of the polling questions asked if ISO 17025 includes the requirements of 9001, and it does. ISO 9001 contains the requirements for quality management systems, while 17025 builds on those with technical competence requirements for testing laboratories and calibration labs as well. 17025 can be a standalone accreditation or layered onto organizations' 9001 management systems for inclusion of lab activities into the management system. The 17025 standard states, laboratories that conform to this document will also operate generally in accordance with the principles of ISO 9001. So, great job answering that polling question. We will have the results of the rest of the questions as notes available after the presentation. Further to the discussion of the ISO IEC 17025 standard, including the requirements of 9001, the 2017 edition of the standard provides two options for laboratories implementing management systems. Option A requires laboratories to address the requirements in Clause 8 of the 17025 standard. Option B allows organizations to establish and maintain a management system in accordance with the requirements of 9001, but that is also capable of fulfilling the requirements of the 17025 standard. So what does this mean? Laboratories that are part of a larger organization with 9001 certification can use the 9001 management system as a jumping off point to incorporate that management system into laboratory activities. Both standards are aligned in Clause 8 for management system requirements, with a few additional technical requirements for laboratories. The standards are also aligned when it looks at non-conforming work, planning, such as contract review, and externally provided products and services. The 2017 edition of the ISO IEC 17025 standard is much less prescriptive and, as stated before, is aligned with the ISO 9001:2015 requirements for cause analysis and corrective action. Both standards require organizations to react to nonconformity and evaluate the need for action. Action should be implemented as needed. One of the new requirements is to update risks and opportunities. This is important because organizations identify risks and opportunities and actions to address them. If nonconformity then occurs, the risk was not identified and should be added to the organization risks and opportunities list. However, that's maintained. Finally, organizations need to maintain records of the nature of the nonconformity, causes, and any subsequent actions taken, as well as the result of any corrective action. Both 9001 and 17025 moved away from the term root cause analysis and now address cause analysis. It is recognized that nonconformities rarely have one distinct cause, and limiting the analysis to one cause could limit the effectiveness of correction and corrective actions. Effective cause analysis is the key to determining actions that yield long-lasting results. Correction, corrective action, and preventive action need to address the cause or causes, not the symptoms of the nonconformity. This is why it is so important to perform effective cause analysis so that the nonconformity does not recur or occur elsewhere in the organization's management system or operations. If the cause of the nonconformity is not effectively determined, suitable corrective actions cannot be identified. Corrective actions need to address the causes of the nonconformity in order to correct the problem and prevent recurrence. Corrective actions need to be appropriate to the effects of the nonconformities encountered. Effectiveness of the actions must be reviewed as well. If the effectiveness of the actions taken is not evaluated, it cannot be determined that the cause was eliminated and the problem corrected. So what is cause analysis? It is the determination of a potential problem's underlying cause or causes. It is the process of identifying all causes that have or may have resulted in an undesirable condition, situation, nonconformity, or failure. It is an analytical technique used to determine the basic underlying reasons that cause a variance, defect, or risk. An analysis of typical causes for nonconformities encountered during audits and assessments leads to potential causes related to inputs, people skills, planning, equipment, policies, consumables, and outputs. We often see causes of nonconformity in poorly defined customer requirements, inadequate training, lack of planning, or poorly written methods and procedures, or procedures not being followed. Poor quality materials put into a process can also cause nonconformity, as well as inaccurate reporting or record control issues. So how do we determine these potential causes? There are some cause analysis techniques that are commonly used in a wide range of organizations and settings. These include the Ishikawa diagram or the fishbone, 5 whys, failure mode and effects analysis, and Pareto charting. 5 whys is probably the most common technique used in general settings. These techniques can also be combined during the cause analysis process. For example, once the fishbone is developed, 5 whys can be used to further develop the cause for each category. We will go over each of these techniques and explain briefly how they are performed in effective cause analysis. The Ishikawa diagram, or fishbone diagram, or cause and effect diagram, is a diagram showing causes of a particular situation. The bones of the diagram are labeled with categories for grouping of causes. Details of the causes are added to the bones. The categories can vary depending on the context of the organization and the nature of the nonconformity. Common categories are 6 M's, 4 S's, or 8 P's as listed here. Once the bones are filled in, causes are identified and corrective actions can be determined and implemented. Again, if further analysis is needed for the causes, you can use 5 why to further drill down in the causes for effective corrective action planning. 5 whys is a simple tool used by organizations to determine causes of nonconformities. The first response is usually a symptom of the nonconformity rather than the cause or causes. You will continue asking why until you get a real cause that can have correction or corrective action implemented to eliminate that cause or causes. Sometimes you may get to a cause before asking 5 times. Why 5 times? Other times you may need to ask why several times and down several branches to identify additional causes. So let's go over a fun example. Hopefully you find this example as humorous as I do. This is my example of a 5 why, and this actually happened to me. So I recently hurt my arm. My right elbow is a complete bruise. So I figured we would go through 5 whys for this as a fun example. Well, not fun because my elbow hurts. Why did I hurt my arm? Well, I fell down. Why did I fall down? It keeps getting better. I fell down because I tripped backwards over my dog. Why did I trip backwards over my dog, you may ask? The dog was behind me, trying to see what was in the shower. Why was the dog trying to see what was in the shower? There was a bat in my shower. No lie, a bat in the shower, on the floor, soaking wet. Why was there a bat in the shower? There are many reasons. The home is old and I travel for work. The fireplace is broken. But let's ask that why one more time. Why was there a bat in my shower? The most important question of my life. Well, upon further investigation, it was determined that the screen that covers the top of the non-functional fireplace was broken and bats had taken up residence. One made it inside the house, flew through the living room, down the hallway, and into the shower. I guess he decided he needed a shower. So when we look at it all together, we can ask why many more times than just 5. Luckily, replacing the fireplace screen and ridding the flue of bats would at least prevent the bats from coming into the house. But it most likely won't keep me from hurting my arm again because I'm a klutz, on top of having bats in my house. Moving on to the next technique is failure mode and effects analysis, or FMEA. In failure mode and effects analysis, you list out all of the typical failures and rank them for severity, probability of occurrence, and probability of detection. Those scores are multiplied together to get the risk preference number, or RPN. Failure modes with higher RPMs would be addressed first, while lower RPN scores would be acceptable risks. This is similar to risk analysis in risk-based thinking when we look at probability of occurrence and likelihood. If we continue with the bat theme, the screen on the fireplace could be one failure mode. A broken window could be another. A third mode could be that maintenance men were in my house when I was out of town, and maybe they left the door open and the bat came in. Probability of detection for the broken window would be 1. The house is small and windows are easy to check. Severity would be high though, because not only could bats come in, but also bugs and rain and other things. Occurrence would be low since the house is set off the street, so it would get a low RPN. The screen on the fireplace would be hard to detect, so that would get it would be the lowest probability, so it would get a high number. The probability of occurrence would be mid-range because the fireplace is old and non-functional, and the severity, as we've seen in this case, was most severe, allowing the bats to take up residence and come in the house. So that would get a high RPN number and would be addressed with correction and corrective action, as it was in my case. The last root cause analysis technique we're going to discuss is Pareto charting. In Pareto charting, the causal factors are tallied per event in the form of a bar chart. The contribution from the top 20% of the causal factors create 80% of the nonconformities. Addressing the top causal factors with correction and corrective action will eliminate nonconformities related to these factors. Once the top 20% of causal factors are addressed, you can then move down to the next level of causal factors and continue to address them until nonconformities don't occur or recur. Now let's move into the changes in the ISO IEC 17025 standard from the 2005 edition to the 2017 edition. The main change was that the requirements for corrective action were moved into Clause 8 rather than in Clause 4. When nonconformity occurs, the lab needs to react to it as applicable, take action, and address consequences. The other change, as we discussed earlier, is that the elimination of root cause analysis and looking at evaluating the need to eliminate the cause and determining the causes. Again, it addresses the fact that nonconformities don't often have one cause, and correction and corrective action can be done on multiple causes in order to eliminate the nonconformity. Further into 8.7.1, the other new aspect of corrective action is to update risks and opportunities. Laboratories must monitor the results of corrective action to ensure those actions are effective. The method of monitoring the results will depend greatly on the causes and corrective actions chosen. And finally, corrective action shall be appropriate to the nonconformity that occurs. A new addition to the 2017 edition of the standard is that the laboratory needs to retain records for the nonconformity's causes and actions and the results of the corrective action. This is related to Clause 4.13.1.1 in the 2005 edition of the standard related to record control. So let's look at the corrective action process as an overview. This is a circle because the corrective action process is ongoing. Nonconformity occurs or could occur, and the laboratory needs to control and correct it. They need to react to it and address the consequences, evaluating the need for action to eliminate causes. They need to then implement those actions and review effectiveness, as well as update their risks and opportunities defined during planning. They need to make changes to the management system, implementing the actions into the management system, such as updating documentation and providing training. Then they need to retain records. They will continue to do this as nonconformities occur or could occur within the system. Take a look at corrective action versus correction. There are benefits to both, but corrective action treats the cause. You determine your cause in cause analysis, and you take comprehensive actions in order to eliminate the nonconformity. Correction oftentimes only treats the symptoms. These are individual actions to address individual issues. Correction does have its place in the corrective action process and cause analysis because a combination of correction and corrective action is an effective way to treat nonconformities. Finally, the 17025 standard requires that laboratories evaluate the significance of nonconforming work, which includes an analysis of the impact on previous results. The laboratory needs to determine the acceptability of nonconforming work and use controls, reference standards, and reference materials to avoid nonconforming work. The impact analysis will look at data from the last positive result to the most current nonconforming work to see if any other issues have arisen. The laboratory needs to notify customers if any of their results are impacted by the current nonconforming situation. We looked at 4 methods for cause analysis, but there are many more ways to perform cause analysis and arrive at the cause or causes of a nonconformity. The analysis method chosen should be based on the context of your organization and the specific nonconformity being addressed. A one-size-fits-all approach isn't effective in ensuring all nonconformities are controlled and corrected and consequences addressed. You need to select the analysis or analyses that suit your organization and the specific nonconformity at hand. What all of this has told us today is that effective cause analysis will ensure that nonconformity does not recur or occur elsewhere in the management system. This saves time and money for your organization by solving a problem only once. Incorporating risks and opportunities into the corrective action process further improves the management system. ANAB offers a variety of training courses related to ISO IEC 17025 2017 and other ISO standards. This is a list of a few of those courses. All of our course offerings can be found at anab.org/training. We're always looking for new ideas for new courses too, so if you have any topics you're interested in, let us know. That concludes my portion of the presentation. I'll now turn it back over to Qualtrics to show you ways you can use technology to assist your organization in cause analysis and corrective action.
Great. Thank you, Melanie, so very much. And I'm going to share my screen here. If you could tell me when you can see mine. Can you see the Qualtrics screen?
Yes, I can.
Wonderful. And I have to tell you, Melanie, you had me giggling when you went through your 5 why process.
I am not lying when there was a bat in my shower.
And I can probably speak for everybody on this call is that we're wishing you a speedy recovery with that.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
All right. And so what I'm going to do right now is just give you a quick tour and show you exactly how you can manage corrective action requests and your cause analysis efforts in Qualtrics. So I'm going to pull over an instance of Qualtrics. And when you first are looking at the system, this page is going to be your inbox, which is ultimately your home page and listing of all the tasks that you need to complete in the system. Now, let's pretend an incident has occurred. And so a claim of deficiency needs to be submitted. All right, so we're going to go to our workflow area. So in Qualtrics, how we're going to kick off one of these claim of deficiencies is through a workflow. Now, workflows are ways to automate processes where each step is defined with customizable fields and routed with automatic email alerts and notifications, really keeping tasks on time and holding employees accountable. Now, our corrective action request is one of our 8 best-in-class workflows that can be pre-populated in your system when you get started with Qualtrics. So let's go ahead and kick off an example. When you open a corrective action request, you will notice a diagram at the bottom that walks you through each step of the CAR process. Now, by automating this process like this, it really is controlling every step. So every CAR instance will be forced to follow the same steps each time. There's not a way to go against this process within Qualtrics. And this is really great for that control that you want with your processes. So let's look at step 1, reporting the possible nonconformance. Anybody in your organization can kick off a workflow if they have the right permissions. Within Qualtrics, step 1, you're going to be going through these specific fields. Tell me the date that this occurred. We'll choose today. What section of the organization or laboratory? What standard is it associated with? Now, in this demo system, I have a number of standards, as you can see, so I'll just pick one. But if you ever to have Qualtrics, we're only going to put the standards that are really important to your organization. Was there a claim of deficiency? Yes. In this example, we're going to be talking about an instrument that was not properly taken out of service. Was there any immediate action taken? You can also add supporting documentation. And then in this case, we noticed this while we were doing an internal audit. After this has been filled out, you'll notice that my next step is submit for review. Now, if I look at my diagram, if I hit submit for review, it's automatically going to route this information to the next appropriate group or individual that's already been predetermined by this workflow, where they're going to receive an email notification and an inbox notification. I happen to be logged in as Trevor. Trevor's a quality manager, and so he's responsible for this next step. So when I hit submit for review, it's automatically going to pop up on my screen. All right, so let's review the possible nonconformance. I can see the information that was submitted in step 1 down here. And if I come up here to the top, is a CAR needed? Yes. What are my additional comments at this point? I can add those comments here in this text box. Was work stopped? If so, when was it stopped? When does it resume? And more importantly, who is going to be responsible for the cause analysis and plan development? You can see here I have a choice of choosing groups of individuals or an actual person to be responsible for this step. Again, I'm going to choose Trevor. That way it sticks with me. If I scroll all the way down, you can see at this step we have two routes. I can either, if a car is not required, I can go ahead and close that here by selecting this button. If it is required, I can submit that to cause analysis and plan development. We'll go ahead and do that now. You can imagine if somebody else was being put in charge of the cause analysis and plan development, they at that point would receive an email and an inbox notification letting them know it's now their responsibility to partake in this part of the process. But we're still Trevor. Trevor is now going to be doing the cause analysis and plan development for this. You can see that these are large text boxes that he'll put information into. You have the ability to choose what type of fields you want to use throughout your workflows. So I'm going to go ahead and type in some information around the 5 why process. You can actually even put in information to guide your users on exactly what they need to do to meet the requirements for these fields. Now, I mentioned you do have the ability to choose what fields that you're going to use throughout this workflow. I'm actually going to pop out of this example and take you into a different car that has already been created using a custom workflow in our system. With Qualtrics, I'm going to go ahead and leave this, you have the ability to configure either our best-in-class workflows that come with your system or create your own workflows from scratch using our workflow designer. So I'm going to pop into one here that we already have started. And you still, I'll pop right into the corrective action request, cause analysis, and plan development. This is an example of how one of our customers is taking one of our best-in-class workflows and has configured it to really guide their users through the fishbone technique. If I scroll down here, you'll see you have your cause analysis and plan development. If I scroll down here to this area, you'll see that we've got our cause analysis for cause and effect, and this is our diagram. Using subforms with this workflow, a user can choose a category of a specific option that they want and then configure the why that's associated with that option that they chose. So you can see in this case, we've chosen people and explained the why process behind it. Method, chosen the why. And you can continue by just simply adding a row, coming down, choosing a specific category, and then continuing the why process beyond this. You can even go a step further and guide your users to use both the fishbone and the 5 why process if you want. By combining those, you can have them go through the 5 why for each individual. Again, it comes down to what your organization is going to want to do with their corrective actions. Qualtrics really has the mindset that we believe that you need a system that can be configured to meet your organization's needs. And so you can simply edit these processes. And the nice thing is that you don't need computer programming knowledge to do that. So I'm going to scroll down and go back to our diagram and finish talking about that corrective action plan process. So you can see we're at cause analysis and plan development. This is a process that will probably go through plan review back and forth between groups of people or individuals until that plan is finalized. At that point, it'll get sent on to implementation. Now, once implementation is done, then you've got that effectiveness review. And if there's one thing that we've heard from some of our accrediting body partners, but then also just users of our system, is that effectiveness review can often be missed. And that comes down to it's something that might not be top of mind anymore. People have forgotten to do it. So how do you make sure you're being alerted? Well, if you have this set up in Qualtrics and it's a controlled process, you can't forget this step because the system's going to remind you through emails and through inbox notifications, and will even alert managers if it's something that's forgotten until this step is done. Once effectiveness review is complete, then the car can be closed. Now, as you're collecting all of this information in Qualtrics around your corrective action requests, you're going to really want to have visibility into that data. And you're able to get that through our reporting. So I'm going to click on our reports, jump out of this corrective action request instance. With Qualtrics reporting, you have the ability to create your own reports, or you'll have some system reports that you can run as well. Here's one for corrective actions. And the first thing you'll notice when you come here to run the report is that there's a lot of filters that you can use. If you can imagine, we have some customers that have been using the system for years. There's a lot of corrective action instances they have to filter through. And so having these filters to be able to really drill down to see specific information is really a benefit of the system. In this demo system, we only have a few examples, so I'll go ahead and hit Run Report. And if I come down here, I'll see a number of corrective action instances that have been created. Information that'll be in these reports include who initiated the corrective action request, the current step, what the claim of deficiency was, the source, the date of the occurrence, the standards associated with, and so on. Plus, if you ever feel like you need more information in this report, you can always come up here to our report designer and add more fields to these reports so you can see more information if you wish. All of our reports can also be exported to Excel and CSV files if you wanted to share them with others too. Now, why do you want this visibility? You want this visibility because then you can start identifying trends. You can start identifying opportunities for improvement and those risks. If you start looking at the section of the organization your cars are happening in and the source, and you start seeing something that's overlapping, well, maybe that's a risk that you've identified. And that's where you start thinking about how you start mitigating and identifying your risks. And so this reporting would really help. You know, with the change of the standard and the way that things have been shifting, we're starting to get a lot of questions too from prospects and customers about how you manage risk in Qualtrics. And really based on our analysis and even conversations that we've had with ANAB, you know, we feel that there's really two important aspects of this. You know, number one, making sure that you have visibility and reporting into your quality management system so you can identify the risks to start, but then also having a mechanism to log and manage those risks that you're identifying. With that being said, we actually created a best-in-class workflow that was newly released this year called Risk Assessment. And this is giving you the ability to log those risks that you identify, you know, status them, give them a score and a severity based on level, and also make sure that you're mitigating them, whether it's something you need to do right away or something that can wait. It's continually reminding you that you have these risks that you need to be aware of. I'm going to show you a report that gives you an idea of some of the information we're collecting with this risk assessment workflow. If I click Run, and we'll run the report, you'll just see some of the fields that we asked throughout this process. You know, who initiated it, the current step, the description, the risk level, the type of risk, the overall status, the severity of that risk, the likelihood of occurrence, and then the ability to mitigate. And when you start really looking and drilling into this information, that's where you can say that you are managing your risk. And so when your auditor comes on and they ask you, okay, how are you identifying and how are you managing your risk? You can actually point them directly to this process and show them how you're doing that. Now, workflows are just one aspect of the Qualtrics system. You know, we present ourselves as an all-in-one quality management solution. So this includes our document management platform that automates documents and really that revisioning process around the document edit lifecycle, as well as our testing and training tool. And that really helps you reduce the time burden associated with competency tracking. You know, between the workflows, document management, and testing and training segments of our product, they all sit on top of a reportable platform, which really makes everything searchable and reportable. And this is where you get that visibility, and that visibility is truly invaluable when you're going into your audits and your assessments, because it's going to give you that confidence that you are ready for that audit, but then it also can help significantly limit the amount of audit prep that you need going into that. Now, all-in-one also refers to our business model. You know, we don't sell our software in modules, and we don't show you a souped-up version of the product that includes features and functions that cost extra. At Qualtrics, we believe in being transparent and feel that configurability and the ability to have a customizable solution is really necessary for your evolving quality needs in your management system. And really the final feature I'll mention, which is often overlooked when you're evaluating a product, is our customer service. When you're in the mindset of looking for a product that fits your needs to stay within your budget, you often aren't thinking about what happens once the product is in place. You know, what kind of service and support can you expect from your vendor? Qualtrics prides ourselves on going above and beyond for our customers, whether it's during the training and implementation phase of the onboarding, or even just helping you troubleshoot and navigate the software once you're up and running. Our customer service and support teams are based here right in Blacksburg, Virginia, and have a 98% customer satisfaction rate. It's one of our most common compliments we receive on review sites like Capterra. I invite you to check us out. And for our customers feel free to check us out there as well. We believe that's really one of our greatest strengths as an organization, and we put a lot of effort to maintain that. Well, thank you so very much for coming to the presentation today. And I see we do have some questions coming in, so continue to put those in there and we'll make sure that we're addressing them. You know, if you're looking into quality management systems now, or even if you think you might be interested in the future, definitely keep us in mind. Feel free to reach out to us. You can contact me at Karen@qualtrics.com, and myself and our team will be really happy to help you out there. And so at this time, Melanie, I'm going to invite you back on and we can start going through some of these questions. And I think, Melanie, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, great. I had muted you. I apologize.
That's okay.
All right, and so we have some questions coming in through the Q&A and the chat. So I'm going to do my best to manage these. I know one of them that came into the chat was, how do you assign a percentage to the Pareto chart?
Okay, yes, I did not go over that during the presentation. So what you do is if you have a certain number of factors, like in the chart that we showed, there were 7 factors, and you tally up each event that's related to that causal factor, then you divide that total for each causal factor by the total number of events that you've had. So you get a percentage. So say you have 100 events and 10 are related to factor 1, that would be a 10% rating for that causal factor for those nonconformities. And you continue to do that and you'll get to 100%. And then you can use Excel to do a bar chart for the tally of the causal factors, and then add a line to it that has the percent contribution as a cumulative percent in Excel as well.
Great. And let us know if there's more questions around that as well. All right, another one that we have, this is kind of funny, probably asked already, but what happened to the bat?
Yes, I saw Andrew put that in there and I chuckled, so I'm glad you had me on mute. So I am a single mom and my son was here along with my dog. And so I had to put on my brave face and I wrapped almost an entire roll of paper towels around my hand and I picked the bat up and I took it outside. And I don't know where it went from there. It was not outside when I got up in the morning.
Awesome. All right, here's another one. Is there a general guideline for how many of the same OOS events, say in a lab setting, could occur before deciding to initiate a corrective action? Or is this on a case-by-case or risk-based basis?
Another excellent question. So I'm going to read a clause out of the 17025 standard where it says, where the evaluation indicates that non-conforming work could recur or that there is doubt about the conformity of the laboratory's operation with its own management system, the laboratory shall implement corrective action. So when you're looking at OOS or out-of-spec work or events in the laboratory, the 17025 standard requires that you have a procedure for handling that. And the actions that you take are based on the risk levels that are established in your lab. So you could have where potentially you have an OOS event for a QC item, but you're allowed to repeat that QC. Now, if it's an OOS for a customer product, then maybe you don't repeat that, or you do a duplicate, or you do a spike, or some sort of other analysis. The laboratory needs to define what their OOS process is and when corrective action is necessary. That way you're not doing corrective action for undue corrective action for nonconformities that may be able to be corrected in the laboratory based on the laboratory's procedures.
Great. All right. We saw some questions in there about whether or not you're going to have access to the PowerPoint presentations. You will. We will be able to share those with everybody as well as the recording of this once it's over. So, of course, you can take notes and watch it again. Here's a question for Qualtrics. Are the entry fields within the tool able to be customized? And so assuming that you're talking about step one, 100%. So when we walk through the whole process, at any point, any part of that can be customized. If there's one thing we understand is that all of our users are completely different. And we really want to make sure that you have the ability to create and customize and configure those to fit what your needs are in your organization. So between the different fields and lists that you can create, you can really make them your own. Or you can even create your own in terms of workflows. We have a number of organizations, some of which are on here today, that have really gone above and beyond in how they've used Qualtrics to create their own processes. You know, some of the organizations that use us today, I think have like 70 plus workflows in their instance, some of them. So it's a very big tool that you can use. Let me go back to these questions now. In what settings are corrections alone sufficient to resolve nonconformities versus corrective actions?
Well, one of the situations that we just talked about was the out of spec event. So a correction would be to rerun that QC sample or to perform a duplicate on the customer sample. It really depends of the risk related to the nonconformity and what that cause is. So regardless if you're going to do correction or corrective action, you still want to do a cause analysis when you're looking at nonconformities within your management system. This will ensure that what you are doing is not just treating the symptom, but that you're treating the actual nonconformity. So an example of just taking correction is, this was one that we see in assessments, is an assessor will see 3 documents that don't have control on them. And so the laboratory will correct those 3 and put control on them with a doc ID and a revision number and all of the required information, but they won't do a thorough review of the rest of their documents. So they've corrected those 3, but there's probably more. Had they done a cause analysis of why their system missed those 3, they may have been able to do a better corrective action.
Great. All right, another one for you. How would you describe the major differences between section 7.10 and 8.7 regarding the topic of nonconformance?
Yes, so section 7.10 discusses nonconforming work, and it requires that the laboratory has a procedure for when nonconforming work occurs in lab activities or results of the work don't conform to their own procedures or agreements with the customer. So really, 7.10 is talking about within the laboratory issues that happen that cause nonconforming work or quote unquote bad results, right? But it does segue into 8.7 in that statement that I read of 7.10.3, where the laboratory needs to initiate corrective actions if there's doubt in the laboratory's management system. So when you get to 8.7, then it's talking about how do you address any nonconformity. So it could be nonconforming work, it could be an issue with a procedure, or it could be an internal audit finding, it could be an external assessment or audit finding, it could be anything related to the organization, the management system, any of your risks and opportunities that you identify. All of those can be incorporated into the 8.7 clause of corrective action.
Wonderful. All right, another question. I think this one's for me. Can Qualtrics be used for ISO 15189 accredited laboratories? Absolutely. In fact, we have some now that use it specifically for that standard. 15189 to Qualtrics, it can be used to manage any type of standard. So we have organizations that are under 9001, 17025, the 15189 program, including the CAP 15189 program. CAP is actually a customer of ours. We also have organizations under GMP, TNI, and so on. Somebody just asked about TNI compliance. Absolutely. We have a number of environmental laboratories under TNI compliance and all different versions of TNI compliance. At the end of the day, when you purchase Qualtrics, what we're going to do during that planning call is take note of accreditations and certifications you are under as a laboratory. And if we have those standards, we'll put them into your Qualtrics instance for you. And then you're just aligning all of the efforts that you're doing on your quality, on your management system to those standards directly in our system. One of the best ways for us to show you this is to do an additional a demonstration for us or with us, and we can show you exactly how that works in the system if you're interested. Great questions. Here's another good one. I may have missed the details that pertains to Qualtrics testing and training module, but can this be tailored to meet ISO 17005 requirements around competency? Absolutely, and you actually didn't miss it. We didn't really focus on that one today because we really wanted to spend a lot of time on the corrective action and cause analysis portion. But yes, the testing and training module is there for competency tracking. You know, when you look at where Qualtrics started, we were taking the ISO standard and seeing how we can automate a lot of that process. And so that is exactly what they had in mind when they started building out that functionality. Again, if you want to take a deeper dive into that, please let us know and we'd be happy to give you a tour of what that portion of the system looks like. Great question. All right, how can Qualtrics help my lab transition from 17025 to 2017? Well, that's a great question. So Qualtrics is the software that is used by organizations to help manage their system. At the end of the day, you still have to do a lot of the work in the back end in terms of getting your SOPs ready, creating your processes, creating your tests and trainings. But our system is truly there to help facilitate that. Now, one of the things that we have seen with the transition is that with the transition, obviously risk was a big topic that was brought up, but then also process management. So because process control is one of these shifts that you're starting to see, we're seeing a lot of emphasis shift from document management. Now, don't get me wrong, it's still very important, but people are starting to put emphasis on process management. So what that means is that if you have a controlled process that's locked down like it is in Qualtrics, you don't necessarily need to have that written out if it's locked down within our system. And so when you start thinking about our best-in-class workflows, and those are corrective action requests, internal audits, proficiency testing, vendor approvals, validations, correct risk assessments, management review, and customer complaints being one of those big ones that's highlighted in the new version of 17025 as well, you know, that's when you start seeing how Qualtrics can help you with some of those transitions. And we can always talk about that further as well. After this webinar is over, I can give you a call. I hope let us know if we're hitting on your questions or if you need more clarification. I know that we have some good time left and there's some more questions coming in, so please feel free to keep them coming. An example Karen showed, Qualtrics used the 5Y. Could it be used for the fishbone or other methods also? Absolutely. And this is where you get to be creative. And so when Melanie and I were actually going through this presentation before we jumped on, we were talking about how you can be creative and even bring some of these philosophies and techniques together. So in terms of what you can do, absolutely. When you're creating and you're customizing the workflows, you're really able to choose the different fields and how they're laid out on the page, who even has access to the fields, who is even going to be able to complete those specific tasks. That's something that we can show you in a demonstration and kind of talk about how some of our current customers are using that. Ooh, I always like this question. Is the Qualtrics system financially feasible for small labs? The smallest laboratory that uses Qualtrics has 2 people in it. The reason why is because at the end of the day, a small laboratory that's under 17025 has the same burden that a larger laboratory with 50 to 100 people have. You know, you might be managing less people, but you still have to show that you are following that standard. And so for some of our smaller labs, what they find is that they're still doing a ton of manual work. And so where the ROI in their process comes in is to, okay, well, I can either hire additional people to help manage quality, or I can bring in a system like Qualtrics that does cost less than an actual hiring an employee to be able to help manage that. So that's usually where we see that conversation go with organizations. We have a lot of organizations with laboratories that are 20 people or less that use the system. Startup companies will start bringing us in, especially when they're just starting the laboratory, so they can get their quality management system set up at the ground up before it starts escalating and becomes more of a burden to manage on a manual level. Yes, Jason, the recording is available. I hope your audit is going well. Jason's in the middle of an audit and he missed some of the presentation, so I hope it's going well. All right, let me jump over to another thing to make sure I've got all the other questions.
Yeah, there are still a few questions on the chat
If you see
box.
some, Melanie, that you want to address, feel free to jump while I get reorganized.
Okay, there's one here that says, is it necessary to initiate the corrective action process if no nonconformance or policy deficiency exists? The short answer to that is no, because the standard says when a nonconformity occurs, the laboratory shall react to the nonconformity. If there is no nonconformity, there won't be corrective action to implement or cause analysis to perform. On the flip side of that, to make it a little more difficult, if you are 17025 accredited or 9001 certified, there is a requirement to address risks and opportunities, and the laboratory or organization needs to identify risks to the organization and correct or address those risks as with actions that are appropriate to the effect of the risk on the organization. I'm paraphrasing there. That's not actually the words from the standard. So what that says is the standards are now recognizing that organizations may perform correction or corrective action on nonconformities that they don't actually realize are nonconformities. Just in their day-to-day actions, they fix things, and they're not documenting them for lessons learned. So the organization needs to perform some sort of risk assessment so that they can identify potential nonconformities that can occur in the systems within the organization and that they can address those through their corrective action program.
Great. Here's another one for you, Melanie. What is the adequate follow-up time frame for corrective actions?
This is always a tricky answer or a tricky question, because really it depends on the nonconformity and the corrections or corrective actions that are being performed. Typically, what we see is that the correction and corrective actions are performed without undue delay and implemented into the management system. And then the laboratory or organization will set some sort of time frame, somewhat arbitrarily, to go in and evaluate effectiveness. Oftentimes, this is 30 days. But that's just an easy mark for people to mark a 1-month reminder. It may be at the next time you process that customer's sample, or it may be the next time you perform that test. So it may not be as long as that is. But you want to perform your corrective actions as quickly as possible after you have identified the cause so that you can prevent the nonconformity from recurring or occurring elsewhere in your management system.
Great. And here's another one that just came in. Do all cars need to be captured on the risk or opportunities register? You know, the danger here is that the register is going to get cluttered.
Absolutely. Well, the first thing I want to say is that the standard doesn't necessarily require a risk register, but as we all know, if you don't document something, how can you prove that you've done it? So we are seeing organizations do risk registers, and you are correct that it could get very cluttered if you put all corrective actions or all cars on the risks and opportunities register. So the standard says that you need to update risks and opportunities determined during planning if necessary. So if that nonconformity has already been identified as a risk, what you would update is the actions that you took to address that nonconformity or that risk. You wouldn't add it as a second nonconformity or risk. So what you want to really do in your corrective action process is take a look at the risks and opportunities that were identified. Was this one missed? If it wasn't missed and it was on the list, then you missed the mark on the corrective action because it did actually end up occurring. And addressing the risks and opportunities are supposed to ensure that those risks don't occur, or that you have some way to accept the risk and that you enhance those opportunities.
Great. Here's a question for Qualtrics. Is the document management functionality only intended for management system documents, or can it be used on a larger scale, such as a replacement for SharePoint? One of the interesting thing about Qualtrics is initially, yes, it's intended for your quality system. However, because of the functionality and the customization, we've seen organizations take it to replace things like SharePoint. We've seen them even put workflows in Qualtrics that are managing processes that are even outside of quality type processes. I mean, we've seen organizations do everything from employee onboarding to like vacation requests and reimbursement requests. I mean, there's a number of things that we've seen organizations do just because of the functionality into the product. Again, if it's something that you really would like to see, we'd be happy to show you in a demonstration. That's probably one of the best ways to see that.
All right, Karen, the questioner about the corrective actions, if there are no nonconformities, they followed up with, so it would be addressed sort of like a preventive action, and you are correct. Yes. So the standards added risk-based thinking or addressing risks and opportunities to replace the preventive action sections of the standard because they recognized that organizations weren't always the best at identifying preventive actions. So now it's a requirement of the standard to identify risks and opportunities to the organization and take actions where appropriate.
Great. Thank you for jumping in. There's lots of screens I'm looking at one time. Do you want to talk about Six Sigma approach?
Yes, so it says views on Six Sigma approach, too complicated. Depends on the context of your organization. The main organization that I worked for developing their risk and opportunity program, we actually did implement a Lean Six Sigma program. We had a Six Sigma executive committee that ran the program. It was managers throughout the different areas of the organization. And in the beginning, we did have to meet 3 times a week to go through all the risks and opportunities that individuals were submitting through our Lean Six Sigma program. But we did do green belt projects, and I believe they did do a 1 black belt project for some of the risks in order to eliminate those and to document the actual gains to the organization based on the actions that were taken. I think Six Sigma would be something that you would include in your program if it's correct or right for the context of your organization, but you would also then use the tools we discussed here today in order to implement actions for those projects that you identify in the Six Sigma process.
Wonderful. All right, and I'll warn everybody, we are getting close to that 3 o'clock mark, and so we'll just go through a couple more questions, but then we'll probably need to wrap up. And if we didn't get to your questions, no worries. We will we'll make sure to reach out to you to get answers to you. And if you have more questions even beyond this, at any point, feel free to email me, and I can make sure that they're routed to Melanie or the right person out here at Qualtrics to get you answers. All right, here is another question. Is there ability to route workflows outside of the organization, like to a third party in Qualtrics? We do have an open API that allows you to integrate with third-party applications. A lot of times people who utilize that have developers on their team that can build the bridge between Qualtrics and that third party. To date, we've seen some a LIMS system interact with Qualtrics through this API to kick off corrective action requests between the systems. So it is possible. You just need both sides to be able to talk to each other. Does Qualtrics have a competency assessment module, tool, or end user will need to create one? That's something that we can go into a little bit further just to kind of identify exactly what you're trying to do in terms of competency assessment. We've seen people do it through our testing and training, but then also through workflows. And so we can do a deeper dive into what you want to do there and determine what would be the best approach with our system. All right. And one last one. Are all third-party ABs equally affluent as accepting of reports, et cetera, during auditing with Qualtrics as A and AB? So A and AB and Qualtrics have been partners / connected for quite a long time. And so there's a lot of people in the A and AB team that are familiar with Qualtrics, but even some that aren't. You can run into an A and AB assessor and they might tell you that they've never even seen Qualtrics before. With Qualtrics reports, they are able to be sent out through Excel and CSV files. And so sometimes people that see them don't even realize that they're coming from Qualtrics. With that being said, we also have some organizations to date that when they know that their auditor is coming, they'll actually create a login for their auditor in Qualtrics so that auditor can come directly into their system and be able to interact with Qualtrics directly. And so we've seen it kind of both ways. At the end of the day, I don't think it's the quality system is there to really help you manage, and it's not necessarily viewed as a necessity from the accrediting bodies. I hope that helps. All right, and we are at 3 o'clock. Everybody, thank you so much for your questions. We'll make sure to reach out to you and get those answers. Melanie, would you like to say anything before we end?
I mean, really just to reiterate that cause analysis is unique to the context of your organization and to the nonconformities that you encounter. The point of cause analysis and corrective action is to improve your management system so that you continually improve it, like 9001 and 17025 require.
Wonderful. Thank you, everybody, for participating today. We are very excited for how many people joined us and all the wonderful questions that came in. And we will be reaching out to get some feedback. We always like to know if this hit the mark and what we can do to improve. So thank you so very much, and we look forward to speaking with you soon.
Thank you.